Ladies, gentlemen, am I often forgotten, but certainly not by me, Garanthem enthusiast. Welcome to the channel and welcome to another guide. In this guide, we will be covering the third and final elite dungeon in the series. Now yes, technically there is a fourth elite dungeon, but you can skip directly to the boss after a certain number of runs, and the two bosses that you face inside of the run are actually mini bosses, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm referring to the Zami dungeon, which I don't honestly count as part of the actual core elite dungeon series. But the more important point is that we are covering the updated FSOA at these dungeons and any other place really that uses magic camp. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get into this guide. So as far as the gear in inventory that I am using, this is kind of bog standard as far as elite dungeon is concerned, or magic camp in general. And starting with the armor and worn equipment, I do have elite tectonic. If you use elite tech inside of elite dungeons, they don't degrade ever, so it is a little bit of a cost saving. However, you would have to do a significant portion of elite dungeons in order to justify the cost of actually doing this, but it's more so just a nice side benefit. And as you've probably noticed, it is Barrow's died, and that is because I have two sets of elite tech. My first set here just has sort of normal perks on it. This one's actually perked up for doing Carapac right now. I just need to swap out the Biting 4 Hoarding for a Biting 4 Mobile. But this Barrow set actually has Slayer perks on it. It has Undead Slayer, it has Dragon Slayer, and if I want to, I could get Demon Slayer on here, and that is just for the benefits inside of elite dungeons for ED2 and 3 respectively, being that these secondary perks will provide 7% free damage to undead or dragon targets, and 7% damage is always worthwhile. And since they have different gizmos, I just go ahead and dyed the armor so I know which one is different, although this was done well before the whole exact matching thing. If I go in here and I tick exact matching, if I have a bunch of elite tech sets or a bunch of shields or something like that, it'll know which one you are pulling out based on the perks on it. But regardless, it is just a way for me to keep my armor sets organized. Now inside of ED3, none of the bosses are poison immune, so Cinderbanes are going to be best in slot. Blast Diffusion Boots are nice because Dedo has made a return with the rotations now that FSOA has, being that we're able to 4-tick Dedo is worthwhile, plus Dedo is also very nice in general for clearing out trash mobs. Using abilities like Greater Chain with Detonate are very strong and worthwhile, so I would always wear Blast Diffusion Boots anyways. The Grim is just there for the crit chance that it provides. It is always worthwhile to bring as much crit chance as possible, being that magic is still crit reliant as a combat style to do damage. The Appraisal set just has best in slot perks. If you have Seismics, that is more than fine. They will do just fine in terms of damage. However, if you can spring for the Appraisals, I would go ahead and do so. Channeler's Ring with the enchantment upgrade is best in slot right now for magic. It is definitely worthwhile to get the extra damage increase that it has for crit damage. Plus it stacks very nicely with G-Conk, which you're basically going to be spamming as much as possible. The one EOF I have here just has G-Staff in it. We don't really have anything else. ABS EOF has some very niche uses at Zami and maybe one or two other bosses, but as far as elite dungeons are concerned, it's pretty much a negatory. So just stick with G-Staff. If you had an ornament kit on your ABS EOF, you can just go ahead and pull it off and put it on your G-Staff for the extra magic bonus. The Zuck Cape is just here to buff Omni Power. If you have the standard magic one, there is nothing wrong with that. The only thing that matters is you get the improved Omni Power, giving you the 4 extra hits and the adrenaline reduction cost. And as far as rune pouches are concerned, I will just hover over them real quickly so you can see which runes are inside each of them. Also, if you want, these are just the standard setup as far as PvMe is concerned, so feel free to check it out there or just pause the video on the pouches to see which ones I'm using. Now as far as weapon swaps are concerned, I have my FSOA. This is kind of standard practice as far as magic is concerned, and the perks on it are P6R1 Aftershock 4 equal 2. These are just kind of standard best in slot perks. The Seismic Singularity here has Flanking 4, Equilibrium 1. I pretty much only use this at Ambassador. There's a couple other ways to get flanking hits on trash mobs, although now that we go fast enough at Crassian, you're not going to use it there. Way back when ED3 was released, most of the time you were not able to one cycle with magic, so so you could bring a flanking swap and used it when Crassian Leviathan swapped over to the other side. This was because instead of spawning and facing you, all the game did was actually just transport the hitbox all the way up, and technically when he was facing the other way, they just turned around the visual of the boss, and you had flanking range. But as you will see in the example run coming up, Crassian is so fast that flanking isn't going to matter here. But I have a bunch of free space in this inventory, so I figured I might as well bring it for some ambassador fun. The tier 88 offhand here just has Karoming 4 equal 2 on it. Technically it is best in slot, but you could combo Karoming with anything else you wanted on here. It really wouldn't matter. The only thing that Karoming is doing is giving extra hits to G-Chain, and G-Chain itself doesn't really do too much damage. It's the effect that we're worried about. So if you just have a standard Karoming 4, feel free to put that on. And what you could even do is if you have a tier 80 or 90 defender you're not using for anything else, you could put the Karoming on there to help save on some inventory space. And last but not least, the shield is just a tier 90 merciless kite shield. I've had this forever. I bring shields pretty much anywhere I go, just for, if nothing else, getting divert procs, but reses are also kind of nice here and there. And again, being I have so many portents in the preset, I might as well bring a shield just for funsies. And the perks on here are just turtling for Venom Blood. I believe this is actually a more common perk combo to get rather than turtling 4 by itself, so you might as well just toss it on. Turtling 4 is the only perk we really care about for shields. There are some niche situations for like solo hard mode Rago where you want something else on an arcane, but this is ED3 and it doesn't really matter. So either bring this or a defender, it honestly doesn't matter too much. Now the last two items I have here as far as worn equipment slots are concerned are just expensive spices. They give extra 50 HP to each of the blubber heals. And while on its own it's not too much, every little bit counts, and when you have kind of a free inventory like this with a lot of extra space as far as food and random items are concerned, you might as well bring it. And the Salve Amulet here is to give you an extra 20% damage on any undead creature in the dungeon. So anytime you're attacking any undead creature like the trash mobs like the zombies or skeletons or anything like that really, you can get the free damage buff. Plus for Terraket or Parakeet, I like to call him for some reason, you get a free 20% damage there just for wearing the necklace and doing nothing else, which makes that boss a hell of a lot faster than normal. Now as far as food is concerned, I just use Super Guthix Brews and Blue Blubbers. You could downgrade these to regular Guthix Brews, or you could swap them out for regular brews if you don't want to pay for the super variants. I like having the slightly better heal on an item that doesn't drain my stats, but this is a pretty niche thing by itself, and I just have it set up to where there's 6 doses here, and each of these blubbers are 3 eats, so I use 2 blubbers for each brew. The portents of restorations pop automatically. They're pretty nice when you're running through a dungeon and don't pay attention to your HP too much. They will just auto heal as you're going. There is a cooldown, so it's not like you can just fill your inventory with them and you'll be off to the races, but they are nice to bring a couple extra as filler for a preset if you don't have any other items that you would like to bring. The lucky charms are just for the off chance of a shadowy egg. They also can give coin drops and some other nice things, so you might as well bring them along to get some extra GP per hour. And being that ED3 is not exactly good GP per hour, this is mostly a guide just for people who want to finish this for log, or if for some reason you really want to keep farming out elite dungeons, go for it. But even at 4.5 or 5 runs an hour, Elite Dungeon 3 falls pretty far behind the other two. I think it's setting right around 50 mil per hour at those extreme rates, and that's just because ECB has fallen off in price so much. And the common loots are honestly pretty terrible here, so any buff that we can get, we should definitely bring. Blessed Flask is just here for a prayer source. If you want to bring some super restores, go ahead if you don't have Blessed Flask. And Vuln Bombs are pretty self-explanatory. You toss them on a target, get free 10% damage, kill things quicker, more runs per hour. Acceleration Potion is pretty nice for just after Crassian, getting over to the single mage with some of the crabs, as well as after killing the Calgerian demon and getting over to the 2 necromancers. So overall, I highly recommend bringing one. And I just bring an overload and an adrenaline potion. These are both kind of just standard practice as far as PVM setups are concerned. Adrenaline renewals give 40% adrenaline when you take a sip, although it is over a 6-second duration, but it's nice for ultimates. When you drop a sun, you get the A pot, you get to your abilities faster. And overload because unless you're some of the top tier players in game, you're not going to be running through this dungeon in one overload sip, so just bring an extra one. Now, something you may have noticed is there is no SGB swap in here. Technically, you can use an SGB on Ambassador. He is technically a 3x3, even though he's honestly about as skinny as this post right here. Technically, his hitbox is 3x3, so if you really wanted to bring an SGB swap, you could, but it's not really useful anywhere else in the dungeon, so I just went ahead and kept it simple and omitted it for this dungeon guide. Now, if you really wanted to go all out and you trusted yourself on food usage and dropped a few more switches and other ridiculous items, you could bring a melee swap and do some hybrid stuff here. However, being that this is a magic camp guide, we're keeping it to magic camp things. Now, as far as relics and other supporting gear and whatnot is concerned, I just use the standard elite dungeon setup, which I run Luck of the Dwarves just because I never want to see a cheese and tomato bada get doubled inside of my chest. If you don't care about this happening and you're not too worried about it, just go ahead and run Zerk Fury, you'll be just fine. And I run Blessing of Het just to help fill out the relic power. I might as well just for the extra healing that we have. Being that blue blubbers aren't the biggest heals in the world, and neither are Super Guthix rests, and sometimes Parakeet gets a hair up his butt and will try and just dumpster you on the last phase, so it does come in handy once in a while. Conservation of energy is standard practice for magic use and is highly recommended. This relic is a staple. I never change it out for anything else. Maybe when we get more relic power, I will change it out or just add some other stuff in here. And I know I keep saying this in every video, but hopefully someday Luck of the Dwarves can be dropped to just like 50 cost, but I digress. As far as other supporting gear, I am on the Ancient Spellbook. That is kind of standard practice for anything magic related, as you can easily spellbook swap to either lunar or standard should you need any spells from those books. And Insight, Fear, and Exsanguinate are the two most powerful spells in game and are highly worthwhile to use. Now, I do go ahead and use the Quarm and Lantidime incense sticks. You can use Spirit Weed incense sticks if you want. However, when you use them with Summoning Renewal, it is kind of redundant, being that or it's kind of overkill, I should say. If you're using a Calg Demon, you only need to hit this once per minute, so usually Spirit Weed Incense will recover all those spec points well within the time frame that you're going to use it. So if you wanted to save a little bit of cost, you could just skip the Spirit Weed Incense. I also go ahead and use Powder of Penance because half the time I forget to sip Prayer anyways, so it is nice. It helps save on extreme prayers. And as I said before, I do use Calgarian Demon here just for the big crit chance that it gives. And as far as potions are concerned, this is just an ogre flask with the thermal bath in it. You can make these every day over at the Ooglog area. They take 10 robust glass each, which you just get from red sandstone mining, which, you know, you get 50 per day. 50 divided by 10 is 5, but each dose you use of this, it lasts for over an hour, and it works with the Lantidime incense sticks. So in 1 day worth of daily, which maybe takes you 5 minutes, you then have 30 hours worth of thermal bath, and you don't have to go to either Anachronia or the thermal bath in Ooglog to get the buff. I do have an overload here. I just bring one in the preset, but I also sip it at the bank just out of force of habit, because some bosses I just overload at the bank. I don't have it in the actual boss preset. Some presets I do, though just to keep the muscle memory up, I do go ahead and always sip an overload from the bank before I run into the dungeon, and then I just take one sip from the overload that I bring with me. Now, as far as weapon poise and triple plus is concerned, this is a 12-minute potion, and if you Lantidime stick, it'll go up to 14, which should be long enough for you to go ahead and run through the dungeon. The average time I see around here is around 13 minutes per run. Sometimes it's more like 14 minutes, which is at the upper end of weapon poison, but if it runs out on the last, 20 seconds of Ambassador, it's not going to be that big of a deal. So I just sip one here, I don't bring anything in the preset, and I'm pretty much good to go. And this is a summoning renewal, it helps out restore more summoning points for your spec bar. But like I said earlier, it's kind of pointless when used with Calgerian Demon just because you're only hitting spec once per minute. So again, if you want to save a little bit of cost, you could just go ahead and skip the summoning renewal potion. And that's about it for the kind of supporting gear, my preset and inventory and everything. So let's go ahead and do an example run. Alrighty, we have the preset loaded up and ready to go. So as far as aura usage is concerned, I just use Maniacal. It's pretty much, I'll use Maniacal just about anywhere. You could use Majorat if you feel like you're taking a bit too much damage, but I would just send it on Manny. And if there's any relevant binds that you might not have bound already, the Undead Slayer ability, or Sigil as it used to be, is something I would have keybound. If you want to, just have Demon Slayer somewhere ready to be clicked. And I do use Metamorph like once or twice during this run, so just have that bound or accessible somewhere on your action bar, or have it around here. Just have it somewhere where you can get to it. But other than that, it is time to go ahead and do a run. And did I bank everything? Okay, I did bank everything. Nope. Normal mode, and we are off. So what I like to do here immediately is surge Bladed Dive to here, run up towards this scout here, and then hold a little bit on G-Chain just so it hits everything, then Omni Power, Dragon Breath, anything left, Bladed Dive Surge over, Ice Barrage these guys, run into this corner, let these crabs sort of come up, and then G-Chain, and then I'll just do a Dedo Charge into a release with a D-Breath, it'll wipe everything out, Bladed Dive Surge, wait for that middle guy to get in the middle of all the things, and then do G-Chain into a Nami, FSOA spec, maybe like a D-Breath. Just target cycle around. If you're struggling to click some of the targets here, target cycle will be your best friend. Especially some of the crabs, they're pretty annoying. But here I'll hit a G-Conk into like a Wild Magic, and maybe D-Breath this guy. Now what I like to do here is click on this part of the wall, and then hit Surge Bladed Dive, and you will just surge all the way around. And then G-Chain these guys, Omni Power. A lot of this run is either going to be G-Chain Omni or G-Chain Dedo with a release of some kind. Surge Bladed Dive over to here and run into this corner here. And then target a zombie, G-Chain, Dedo, release with an auto and a D-Breath. This one wanted to aggro Ogre over, so I'll just like combust, maybe like Ice Rack just so he can die. And here I like to run into this corner. If that one doesn't aggro, then I will just surge and Bladed Dive over to here. And for these guys, I will just G-Chain like Wild Magic. Maybe hit him with a Corrupt before I G-Chain, something like that. Target the last one and cross the little mast here. And then I go ahead and surge across, G-Chain. Sometimes I will wait for that one to pop up, but I didn't this time. But you can usually just Ice Rack. If you really want to, you can wear your Salve Amulet for these parts. But most of the time I'm kind of lazy and don't. For these two, you only have to kill these two Zealots. You don't have to kill anything else for the gate to open. So I just kind of basic these guys down. Then what I like to do is kind of Ice Auto, so it freezes the other things so they don't come in. And then what I like to do here for Crassian is I'll run up to the center, run up a little bit, hit an ability Surge, and then target cycle into a Smoke Cloud, Sun, and toss a Vuln Bomb, 3 basics, and just kind of do a standard Sun rotation from here. Go into a G-Conk Wild Magic, continuous into an Asphyx, hit Omni Power into a G-Staff, and then here I'll just stand kind of on either side, avoiding. Maybe hit another G-Staff, and then over here I'll just stand here and do attendees. G-Conk into a Wild Magic, you hit Asphyx, and it's already dead. With Magic being updated, you can kill this boss rather quickly. It's either a high 30s or a low 40s now, instead of like a high 20s. Or low 50s or something like that. But here, I'll just kind of Bladed Dive Surge around. Surge Bladed Dive. This is the first place I use my Acceleration Potion. And then what I like to do is get melee distance to the Zealot. G-Chain. Charge up a Detonate. Release with a D-Breath. And yeah, these crabs, the little scuttlers can be kind of annoying to click, so I just use target cycle for most things in this dungeon. Now I'll let these zombies clump up and hit G chain. It'll hit all except one, and then you just kind of got to pay attention to which one it doesn't. Use Omni on all the others, and then target the last one. And then that gate should open rather quickly, and then you just kind of surge, bladed dive. That was kind of some messy movement there, but once you get down to this clip, you hit jump down. I think on release it said jump off, but they quickly fixed it, which is kind of funny in a morbid sense. And depending on how these guys line up, I always do a G chain into a Deado, but sometimes they line up, sometimes they don't. If not, what you can do is if you're standing on this tile is release your Deado and then dive over to here immediately, but if you try and do it from other tiles, it doesn't usually work. This guy, I'll just like wild magic and ice rack, and then these guys, what I'll do is I'll just freeze them, G chain, Omni. You can also hit your Undead Slayer sigil to help out with damage. Some people will just camp Salve Amulet through the dungeon, which, yeah, it's fair, but I do like the 50 stats that the EOF provides. Kind of just basic down this Necromancer, bladed dive over to here. And these are the only things you have to open up, or you have to interact with these artifacts. There's one on this side, one on the other side, and that's what opens the gate. So technically you only have to kill 2 Necromancers in here. The one that blocks each of the gates, and then just activate the artifact. On release, I thought you had to kill everything in here, but you don't, so what I like to do here for this bridge section is bladed dive. I'll hit Devotion and Surge, and then target the Necromancer spamming Ice Barrage. Hit a G chain, charge a detonate, release with a Dragon Breath, and then just kill off these sea horrors. Usually they don't take too much. And then I'll bladed dive over, freeze these guys with an Ice Barrage, maybe hit a Corrupt, a G chain into a D breath, so it hits them twice. And then what I like to do for this portion is I like to click on this tile here, right where the wall sticks out, and surge bladed dive. And you just kind of fly right through. Now what I like to do here is do a little bit of damage, usually just building up adrenaline. And then I'll go ahead and Nami and FSOA spec on these guys. And then I'll try and hit G-Conk, just building up my adrenaline as fast as possible. Get to 100, and then surge bladed dive over. Hit anticipate, surge, and then target cycle into a metamorph. And here I'll hit Tendies into an Asphyx, do a Omni Power, Wild Magic. I kind of goofed that up a little bit because I was trying to explain it, but what it is, you're just trying to get them to 200k as fast as possible. Sometimes you can get really lucky with the damage you do there with like a bunch of crits. I forgot to put my Salve Amulet on, that's kind of important. And then the bloat's just going to come over. You can hold him in place by standing in the way. So when he was trying to go over this way, and so I just didn't let him by standing in front of him, and I'll do the same thing here. I did let this rift spawn before the last phase, but I was just threshing here. And then I'll just go ahead and do the same thing of Nami, FSOA spec, target Parakeet again. We hit a Corrupt if I can. I'll just do Metamorph into an Apot, hit my Sigil, G-Conk, and I'll go ahead and hit G-Chain into an Omni Power just to help out with health. Hit Tendrils. Wild Magic is fixed, and he's dead. That was pretty fast for a Parakeet or a Terraket, whichever you want to call it. Here, I'll just Devotion, G-Chain, Deado, rinse, repeat, per usual. Sometimes Parakeet will take a little bit longer. What you can do is if he starts his wall of... Actually, I'll just go over that later on when I do the run over. Or I explain the fights in a bit more detail. Here, I just do the Calg Demon per usual. Usually a Wild Magic is fixed. And this is the second point where I use an Acceleration Power Burst. I'll bladed dive surge again, and then just kind of bladed dive surge around until I'm over here. And what I'll do is I'll target this necromancer first, because it'll bring this one closer to the gate. And then just kill this necromancer. Sometimes you can get the aggro of this one in the room with the Caldurian, and both of them will be over here, so that's just something to keep an eye out. Bladed dive. Maybe use an asphyx on this guy. And then kill this necromancer, and you're good. And from this tile here, if you stand here, you can just bladed dive over to the dive point and continue on through the dungeon. In here, what I'll do is just kind of surge and dive around. Now, unfortunately, we aggroed the mini-boss, but it's not too big of a deal. And here, what I'll do is I will use Dedo, but I'll release it with a Nami and then FSOA spec, whatever's left. And if you want to, you can kill the mini-boss. Since you are spec'd and whatnot, I'll kill it just to show off what it gives, which is, it's not a whole lot, but if you need a bunch of DG tokens, killing these mini-bosses like the Scuttler or the guy that's over here, you'll see them on the minimap icon. They're actually pretty good for DG tokens, so if you need tokens, definitely kill all the mini-bosses you see. At least on the main path, I would kill them. For these two skeletons, the warp skeletons can hit pretty hard with their magic hits. Sometimes they hit harder than like Crassian does. And here I just like to surge bladed dive. I'll ice barrage these guys and then wait for the skeletons to come over. Hit a G chain and charge up another detonate. You usually won't have detonate here if you don't kill the mini boss or if the mini boss isn't there. But if you do decide to kill the mini-boss because you just want the extra DG tokens, then you should have it. If not, just use Omni. It's basically either use Detonate with your G-Chain and release with something, or use Omni Power. And here, something to keep in mind is the Warp Skeletons here. If they are close enough to the mini-bosses that can spawn here, then they will aggro them. But there's no mini-bosses here, so you can just kill the two Warp Skellies. Kill the two scouts here, and you will have access to Ambassador. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and just bank right here, load up your preset, and you are good to go. Surge on down. I like to click on this little tile here, and go one more forward, hit my calc, anticipate, and target cycle with a smoke cloud into a sun. And then just triple basic per usual and kind of just follow a standard sun rotation. Now I preemptively move over here to the north, and that's just for the smoke attack that he does, which is right here. You'll see this bar, and wherever you're standing, you'll plant 2 smokes, and it's separated by, I think it's 2 ticks, maybe 3. But now there's double smoke there, and then I can just go back to my sunshine, hit tendies. Now that black hole, all you have to do is hit a stun once. Here, I'll just like wild magic into an asphyx. And he should be phased here. Usually a sun will phase him through phase 1 and you shouldn't have to deal with a second plant. If not, just plant the second plant where it is. Now here, I target cycle when they come out or just before they come out, and so you can target that southwest one. And then here it's just a matter of doing some threshold damaging and killing all of the fragments, or the Roombas, as some people like to call them, including myself. Sometimes hit them with an Omni Power. You can actually flank these as well on the first hit. And usually on the next one is when I like to start a Natural Instinct, so here I'll Natty. Hit him with an Ice Rack, into like a G-Conk, into a D-Breath, something like that. And here, I will go ahead and plant my Sun. You can get pretty close there, but it is kind of risky. And then go ahead and Nami, FSOA spec, and just do another Sun rotation. Make sure you're calved up. Here I'm just letting this fix play out so I can get a G-Conk into an Omni. Deep impact into an impact. I'll bladed dive out the way just to plant the smoke. Pray for the mage hit. And maybe just hit him like with a detonate. Here we're just basically waiting for our sun to come back off cooldown. Overload if you need to. And we're just going to wait for our sun here. And now we have a pot for this sun. So we sun, a pot. We hit... Oh, we don't have a flank. Hit an auto Nami. And FSOA spec and just keep doing damage. Auto 2 Otis Fix into a G-Conk. Into an Omni Power and hit tendies. Eat as you need. Magic pray for this part and just hit Devotion. All you need to do. And he's dead. So, as you can see, Ambassador is pretty straightforward. You just use 3 Sunshines. 1 in phase 1 to get him phased, and then 2 you kind of start early so you can get access to it quicker on phase 3. My kill times here at Ambassador have been either super high 250s or kind of in the low 3s to maybe a 310. 310 is slightly on the lower side, but it just kind of depends on RNG, and we are done with the dungeon. Now, I will go ahead and go through the dungeon and cover some of the bits that I have missed and a little bit of extra detail as far as lures or movement or anything relevant to the bosses. So let's go ahead and get into that now. Alrighty, so we just finished our run and we're going to go through kind of the player movement, the lures, extra boss information, anything I can really think of just on the spot. But first, for one run, let's see how much we made. Yeah, 5 mil per run. That's about average, honestly. ED3 is not known for its commons GP per hour. So the only way you really make money here is by getting ECB pieces, and those have fallen a long way from the glorious 3 bill that they once were, and is why ED3 GP per hour isn't too good anymore. Although, hopefully, maybe with some range update, ECB will see some type of resurgence or something like that. So the future will only tell us. But anyways, I've rambled on long enough. Let's go ahead and go back through the dungeon. And from the start, yes, I just surge bladed dive, let everything kind of spawn, and G-Chain Omni. And then here, what you can do is it doesn't really matter where you're standing too much. The thing you just have to do is hit bladed dive in this general area and surge at the same time, and you'll be teleported to kind of this area here. Now, as you're running up this way, these 3 mobs will kind of come over as a line and stop, and then I just Ice Barrage the middle one, and obviously just stand behind it, G-Chain Deado, and the whole thing is good to go. It should wipe out everything here. Now, the thing to keep in mind is, as you see, I'm running this way, there's nothing blocking my path. However, if you are one tile here to the north and you try and surge, it'll push you out this way. Now, before Surge got the update and was able to surge around things like that, you would just surge straight into this little rock here. And it was pretty annoying. It would limit your surge, and also bladed dive would just have you on the same tile because you could only BD 1 tile, and then you had to run up annoyingly. So make sure when you're back here killing the mobs, I usually just stand on this tile and kind of use this glowing thing here, this ring, to make sure I'm on the right line of tiles, and you'll be able to get up here no problem. Again, for this section, I usually stand somewhere here to the north, and then I click on this part of the wall right here. I literally click right there. And as you can see, it pushes you into a diagonal on this tile because you can step on this tile. So when you surge, it puts you here, and then obviously you can just bladed dive to over here, and then it puts you right in range for all of the mobs here, and then you can continue on your merry way. Again, the lure spots, I just stand in this corner so that way everything is pretty much in front of me, and I usually try... It takes a bit of time to be able to figure out which zombie is going to be, the most conducive for starting, but usually there's not too many of them there, so everything will die anyways. And then here, I used to stand on the gate. I've tried standing north, but honestly, this tile in the corner here is the one that I have found to work the best so far, so experiment around. Sometimes you can stand in the center of them. I've seen some people do some strats out here and wait for all of them to come around, but these zombies move so slow, I think it's faster to kill the groups individually. Now, as far as Crassian is concerned, you can actually walk pretty far into the instance. I believe this is the line, maybe it's one tile further, but I usually just kind of go in line with this boulder, and then once I'm here, I'll just click a tile right around here, and then I just surge in. Now, the reason that I do a ability like a defensive or something like that and then surge in to plant my sun is actually to time it so I can pretty much get all of my spec out and everything and then move to the side before that giant beam shoots out of the way. So I hit my defensive, surge, bladed dive in. Sometimes I dive, sometimes I don't. It just depends on what I'm feeling. And I immediately hit target cycle, smoke cloud, and sunshine. And then as I'm standing here, you'll see Crassian charge up that giant like acid beam type thing. And all you have to do is just step out of the way. If you're on this tile line going back or this one going back, I just kind of use like these two decorations to keep in mind. You will be out of the range of the attack, and it goes all the way back to where the acid spawns, which is in line with these stones here. And from what I can tell, as far as what side he is going to start that whole like swooping animation with all of the rocks flying up and everything, I think it just goes to which one you are closer to, and I think it'll just follow you regardless. So all you have to do is, if you're back here, it is this tile, you will only get hit once, and I believe it is this tile, or I think it's actually one in. Yes, somewhere in this area. It's kind of hard to tell when the boss isn't here. But if you're in these areas, you only get hit once, and it's like a 4K, and you'll be soul splitting the whole fight anyways. You just don't want to like stand here, obviously, or stand in it because you get hit for constant 4Ks, like every game tick, and you just get comboed out. However, if you want to play it really safe, you can just melee distance and then stand on this tile or on this tile over here, and you should never get hit by any of the swoop attacks. Plus, if you plant your sun far enough, you'll be able to use all of your sunshine no matter what. I see a lot of players who haven't done the dungeon too much. They will sun on one side and then kind of lose access to their sun when they're getting forced away. That's why you always kind of see me plant my sun, if you're watching on stream or something like that, in this general area in the center and just kind of move to either side of it, so I'm always able to do maximum damage. Now, as far as the acceleration potion is concerned for this part, once you kill Crassian, I just run through until my character kind of disappears, and then I surge bladed dive to here, and then activate my potion, bladed dive, surge, surge, bladed dive, surge, kind of just rinse, repeat, and flip-flop between the two until I get over here. And it's kind of hard to see now, but where the little rock decorations jut out from the main wall up on that western side, that's kind of the thing I aim for. There's like two square rocks that are kind of on the ground decoration, or are part of the ground decoration. And that's just kind of what I click for, so I get a diagonal, and then I just kind of go around. Now, when going through this gate, I make sure to hit surge bladed dive to get into this tile, because you'll be lined up with this pillar, so if you like bladed dive surge, it doesn't work out sometimes, so I just surge bladed dive to get here, and then that's how I kind of get this whole motion go. Now, when you're jumping down this cliff here, this tile you land on like 90% of the time. The 3 mobs that you have to kill, the necromancer and the 2 bigger skeletons, they will usually line up just fine for a deado with a release of a D breath, and then you can just bladed dive on release and go through here. There is a surge that, like a bladed dive surge combo. I don't remember what tile it is that you have to stand on or which one you have to click on, but it basically puts you like right here. So if you know how to do that surge, feel free to do that one, but I just bladed dive and run up, and then I kind of search the middle, and then I use my last surge to kind of get around to this area. Once I kill, you only have to kill one of the necromancers on these 2 sides. You don't have to kill the west and the east one. You can just kill one or the other and you're good to go. The 3 zombies that are here you will have to kill, and then you can go into the temple. Now again, on this part, it's not actually mobs that you're killing that will open the center gate. You just have to kill the necromancer in front of this gate to open it, and same for this one, activate the blackstone artifacts, and that's what opens this gate here. And for what I like to call the bridge of death, you just keep range prayer on, you devotion, you surge through, and then you just ice auto this guy. If you ice auto the necromancer with ice barrage, it will hit the 2 sea horrors, and then you can just go to town killing them. Now, as you notice, these 2 mobs are still here and they might hit you a little bit, but if you bladed dive, Most of the time they will just leave you alone. And the pathing, you just go this way. All the stuff over here is just for like the pages you have to collect, or sometimes other mini bosses can spawn in these areas, but that's honestly about it. There's nothing really too important over here. And to avoid these 4 mobs here, all you have to do is click on this tile here. And as you can see, your character will walk diagonally into this tile, which will line you up very nicely for a surge. And then you can just bladed dive afterwards. And obviously that just looks like this. And then I just click bladed dive on this general area here, and you just kind of zoom right through. Now again, for Terraket, or Parakeet as I like to call him, you only have to kill the 2 necromancers and the giant skeletons. Nothing else really matters here as far as opening the gate is concerned, but I like to get my Nami and my FSOA spec off before I go into the arena, just to make the fight in here a little bit easier. And once I have that done, you can just surge bladed dive, and you will get to here, round the corner, hit a defensive, then surge, target cycle with a smoke cloud, and hit metamorph, and for me that's just here on ability 7. And how Parakeet works as far as holding him in place is concerned is you are actually able to body block him like some mobs can do to you, or you can do to other mobs, or some mobs will body block each other, meaning he can't path directly through you. So all you have to do is when he spawns is stand 1 tile to the east of him, as long as you don't do any type of pushback. If you want to deal with the corpse carrier first and kill the 2 larger bloats that spawn, you can actually move Parakeet with shock or horror, and you can move him back a tile, and then he will go over to this one and spawn the corpse carrier first instead of the bloat. If you don't think your damage is going to be quite good enough for dealing with phase 3, although honestly phase 3 is really simple just because you have salve amulet going full tilt, you have metamorphosis, it's pretty consistent as far as damage is concerned, and as long as you do some decent food to mouth, then you should be fine. But all I do is I metamorph and try and use G-Conk into like attendees, and then I usually should try and do a 4-hit asphyx just to try and get it as close to 200k as possible. And then once I get him close to 200k, that's when I go ahead and use Omni Power into Wild Magic. And Undead Sigil does work on this boss, so I would probably use the Undead Slayer Sigil or ability, whatever it's called at this point, with the tendrils and the asphyx, just to help out with the damage there, getting him close to 200k. Because once he goes below 200k, he'll wait till his next auto attack, and then that's what starts the phase transition, and he'll go over, do an uber heal here, and an uber heal or an uber heal over here, depending on which one he's closer to. And then when he comes back for phase 2, that's when I just do stuff like charging up a detonate, some basic threshing, maybe toss on a couple bleeds. I don't do anything really fancy here because I'm just waiting for Nami and FSOA spec and metamorph all to come back off cooldown. Now in an ideal world, you should be able to get him before the rift spawns. However, if the rift spawns on phase 3, I find that rather obnoxious because it spawns even more mobs on you, and even though the skeletons by themselves don't do a whole lot of damage and half the time they'll splash on you, when there's like 30 or 40 skeletons in this room because the corpse carrier is spawning a bunch, the rift is bringing out a few every couple seconds, that damage on maniacal can add up rather quickly, and so I prefer to deal with the rift during phase 2, or just let it spawn at the very tail end of phase 2 and then kill it while he's in phase transition. And for when he's trying to get over to the corpse carrier, you can just stand this way. Just make sure you're targeting him and using abilities on him during the transition when he starts to fly around before you target the rift. Because if you kill him with like AoE damage, or you kill him immediately target the rift, if you're no longer targeting him, sometimes he can slip through and just go over, and then he'll come back and go up to a different tile. But other than that, then I just usually will move to this tile on the north side of Terraket, just so the bloats will kind of come into a nice area, and things like corrupts will then spread around like wildfire. Your dragon breaths will hit a lot of different targets, and you can do things like G-Chain Omni. It'll hit the bloats. Sometimes the bloats will still die, but the whole goal of phase 3 is just to kill him as fast as humanly possible, dump out all of the damage, make sure you have your salve amulet equipped and things like that. You also will have your Undead Slayer Sigil back up and running, and post FSOA nerf, the best thing for Parakeet that I have found is just do damage now and ask questions later. Now what's kind of funny for this next section is it's only 2 zombies and a mage, but for some reason these 3 mobs here, I swear they do almost as much damage as Parakeet himself does. Like they hit you for like 3 and 4k, so this is the one spot I would say just have protect mage on and try and kill them as quick as possible with like G-chain Deado and stuff like that. Now in this room, the only thing you actually have to kill is the Calc demon that spawns, and Demon Slayer sigil works. If you have Demon Slayer on your gear, go ahead and use it. It'll give you extra damage, but I think it is kind of not really worthwhile since it's only 1 mob, but if you have it, you might as well go for it. Now here is the second location where I use my Excel pot and then I just bladed dive, use the Excel pot, bladed dive surge, run a couple tiles, bladed dive here, bladed dive surge, surge bladed dive, and then I end up here. This guy will get aggroed and come over closer to the gate while you're killing this necromancer, and then you can kind of just wait here and kill this necromancer, and then once the gate opens, you are off to the races. Then you just have to kill the necromancer that is sitting here, and then once those 2 are dead, that is when the gate will open, and you can just go ahead and bladed dive and dive down into the abyss. Now sometimes the scuttler will spawn here, sometimes it doesn't. If you surge and surge this direction, you can get the aggro of him, which is annoying, but honestly you can usually just ice barrage it and keep it out of the way if it spawns. I went ahead and just killed it in the example run because I just felt like it, haven't done it in a while. And the warp skeletons that are in these last couple of rooms, these are just as painful sometimes as Ambassador if you're not paying attention. They can easily clap you and send you right back to Death's office. So I usually just keep Protect Mage up during this, or in this room's case, I will ice barrage the 3 mages and then run behind them to body block the skeletons, and then use something like G-chain Deado or G-chain Omni, depending on which one is off cooldown, to take care of all of these. Now in this room, I have noticed the past few runs, I did a couple hours here, and I have not seen a single mini boss spawn in this area, so I don't know if I've just gotten extremely lucky, or if it was updated to remove them, or if there was an update to remove them. But what would happen is, if you see these 2 ground decorations here and kind of draw a line this way, and it kind of extends almost to here in like this box radius, if a warped skeleton went inside this whole box area just based off of these ground decorations and kinda to this area, what would happen is the way elite dungeon mobs aggro is they kind of have a radius around them. So if you had a perfect line of mobs in a given area for, you know, like what actually the game has line of sight to see, what will happen is it kind of just chain react aggros and pulls a bunch of stuff towards you, rather than in most areas where it's just a single target will aggro if you're in range, but they don't have a radius around them that will then tell other mobs to then aggro. So in the case of these mini bosses, what would happen is, as far as I know, I think they're still in game, but there is 3 potential mini bosses here that can spawn. So if the warp skeleton popped into this zone, that would then trigger the aggro for the 3 mini bosses and then just pull everything towards you, and then you're getting stunned by like 2 to 3 mini bosses, and it's not a good time. So let me know down in the comments below if they ended up removing these or drastically dropped the spawn rate or whatever happened to them. But anyways, once you kill the 2 warped skeletons down here and the 2 scouts, you are off to the races for Ambassador. Now if you look at the floor decoration here, this is the line where I think once you cross it, I think this tile right here counts as starting Ambassador, so you have to be pretty careful on that one. So I just kind of stand 1 line behind it, and then that's when I use my Anticipate. You can like surge bladed dive to under Ambassador or close enough to Ambassador to where you would have Sunshine close enough to get flanks under, but for P1 I just don't bother. I don't really think it's worthwhile, at least for just kind of doing normal kills here. But other than that, you just do the Ambassador fight per normal, and with magic being a lot more consistent now, it's pretty straightforward as far as Ambassador is concerned. It'll take 3 Sunshines roughly to do all the damage. Sometimes you'll get lucky and kill him faster in phase 3, although the quicker you can get your Sunshine off during the Roomba phase, the quicker you can then get your Sun off for phase 3, which will result in a faster boss time. But other than all of that information, there isn't really too much else I can think of of off the top of my head that is worthwhile. So instead of rambling for another 10-20 minutes, I think I'm just gonna call the video here. And let's go ahead and roll that outro. Ladies, gentlemen, and I did not forget about you Grand Thumb enthusiasts. Thank you very much for watching. Your viewership is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next guide. Peace.